Could be bad. The two of us are really salty this morning.
Rick Naerebout, how are you, sir?
We're doing okay. We're doing okay. Little salty, but we're good.
The number of people that have started coming in here towards the end, and I guess it's just like the end of the session where people are like, I cannot. I want to slit a throat.
So, we're not to that level.
Not to that level,
No.
but just a little salty.
A little salty.
Okay, well, look, we won't talk about what policy. What I wanted to talk to you about, the bird flu is a big thing nationally, obviously, and it's very complex. People don't understand why egg prices are going up. People don't understand how dairy is related to it all. You're the president of the Dairymen Association. Is it Dairymen or just dairy?
Dairymen.
Okay, but it's not the cattlemen. It's the Cattle Association, right?
Cattleman. And so...
is it the Cattleman Association or is it Cattle Association?
Cattlemen's Association.
Okay, and same thing with Dairymen.
Yeah, Dairymen's Association.
Okay, great. I get these things screwed up. Anyway, so look.
We don't get offended.
Yeah. Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. That's not where you're salty. Talk to me about the bird flu, because again, this is a really large consideration for dairy as well. And we've all seen what's happened in the egg industry and obviously chicken industry. It's like, this is really at risk of jacking up like an omelet, $20. Like, you want an omelet somewhere, good luck, man. This is a real problem. Talk to me about this.
Yeah. So a real problem. It's not a new problem. You know, we've had bird flu in the poultry population here in the country since 2015. So we're going on 10 years of bird flu, you know, being passed from waterfowl to poultry. And it's just in the last year where we've seen that go from waterfowl to dairy cattle. And, you know, arguably it's endemic in the dairy population anymore. And not just dairy. You know, I think there's over 50 mammalian species that have contracted bird flu from waterfowl. So
50
mammalian species.
Okay. Can we back up? Do we
have to go to biology 101 for you or what?
Listen to me. You are salty. God bless you. We don't have to go that far back, but when the damage it has caused to the poultry industry is substantial.
Yes.
Should we be worried about or concerned with that in the dairy industry?
No. The way it affects a dairy cow is like you and I getting the flu. It's not a significant, you know, life-threatening medical event for a cow. She, you know, goes off milk or goes off feed, reduces milk production for a 2 to 4 week period, varying symptoms with cows. And then she's back to normal. So within the dairy herd, we treat it just like you and I would treat the flu. You know, the more severe cases, you're going to IV them some fluids, you know, get them some aspirin for the discomfort or some other anti-inflammatory, but you really treat it just like you and I would treat the flu in ourselves. So for the way it affects a cow is completely different than the way it affects poultry. With poultry, it's almost always fatal. And so you've got two very different considerations in how you try and manage it in our different, you know, animal populations.
Gotcha. That's great to know. So bottom line, it's like a cow gets a flu.
Yes.
And for poultry, it's like, no. This is like Ebola. You're going to die.
Yeah.
Okay. Talk to me about what happens with the cow in that time frame, because there are conversations about vaccinations for this, right? For in the poultry industry, and this is not a new disease worldwide, right? I did very rudimentary research. Like, listen, man, the people were worried about this in Ireland in like 1870. Like, this is not a new thing, and addressing it is also not a new thing. But talk to me about what happens with a cow. Like, do you guys ditch the milk? Do you quarantine the cow? Are there medical therapies like vaccinations and stuff that are frequent? Like, help me understand that.
Sure. So where we're at today and the way we treat it with cattle is the treatment depends on the severity of the illness and the symptoms of the cow.
Sure.
Most cows, I mean, it's like, you know, kids at your elementary school trading the flu around in the classroom. Think of that as you know, put that in the context of our dairy herd, where you've got these girls, they're I'm knocking things around here.
I even moved the boom for you.
I know. I got long arms and long legs, and it's awkward. So you've got varying degrees of symptoms, and they're trading around bird flu to each other like our kids trade the flu virus and other viruses around in elementary school. And you treat it just based on how severe the symptoms are and how she's being impacted. So most of the animals, they don't feel great, but you don't pull them into the hospital pen and treat them. They work their way through it. The more severe cases, yeah, you're going to pull them out, put them in hospital, monitor them, give them fluids, give them anti-inflammatories, try and help them feel better, and then get them back to the milking string. And it's a 2 to 4 week window as you're working through and as the virus works its way through the herd has been typically our experience with, it working through Idaho dairy farms. What's interesting is on some of our dairies, we're in round 2, where they had the virus May to July timeframe last year is when it hit most of the dairy herds in the state, was that window of time. We're seeing some round 2s where the animals are completely asymptomatic or the symptoms are very, very mild compared to what they experienced a year ago. And so the animals do build up some sort of immunity, to it. So that's a recent development that we're starting to observe, and something that's very interesting because round 2 for us looks very different than round 1 that's still working its way through California. And again, they're on round 1. They've not had it work through their herd. But anymore, most of our dairy farmers, when you start to list the things that they're worried about and things that are stressing them out and keeping up at night, bird flu doesn't really make it high up on that list. There's other risk factors that they're worried about right now, outside of bird flu.
Okay. And when you say that it's working through and they're asymptomatic, are dairies proactively testing for these things? Like how do you find it if it's asymptomatic?
Yeah. So USDA is requiring all dairies, all states implement a bulk tank testing program. So in the last month, the last report I got from the Idaho State Department of Ag is they had tested 96% of the herds in Idaho in the last month, and they had fewer than 5 positives come out of that. So they're taking a sample from the bulk tank of each dairy and checking it for bird flu. And so that's where we know we've got herds that are completely asymptomatic, but testing positive on a milk sample.
Got it. So with the bulk tank, and again, I presume that is exactly what it sounds like. It's a giant
tank of milk.
Great, giant tank of milk, and they dip something in like a hot tub dipper. It's like little stick. But the question I have specifically is that a potential mechanism of transmission for it to jump species to us? Because you're like, look, 50 mammalian species, are we one of them? Like, do we carry a version of the bird flu?
So yeah, you have had dairy workers, poultry workers, other individuals that have come in contact with, bird carcasses that have gotten bird flu. And again, in the human population, it's varying symptoms. All the dairy workers that have contracted it, they get conjunctivitis, which is pink eye. So they have pink eye for a couple of days, and then after that, they're fine.
So it messes with their ducts.
And typically it's probably coming from them itching their eye with something on their finger when they itch their eye. That's the suspected mode of transmission. But the reality is, you as a consumer, as long as you are consuming pasteurized dairy products, you got nothing to worry about. The pasteurization process works, and it deactivates the virus to where you don't have any risk consuming pasteurized dairy products.
Gotcha. Okay, so the risk then theoretically would come from unpasteurized, generally like whole. I know there are a lot of smaller dairies in the Treasure Valley that have like 10 to 15 cows, and they offer unpasteurized products. So that's where the risk of human contraction would really be highlighted.
Correct. And honestly, if you're consuming unpasteurized dairy, I'd be more worried about some of the other illnesses you could get from that than I would be bird flu.
What are the other diseases? We'll talk about it later.
There is a whole list of them.
Okay. So from a bottom line standpoint with human consumption, the pasteurization kills this. It's not like, I remember being really worried when I was a kid about mad cow disease because my brother told me, he was like, it doesn't even matter if you cook it. It doesn't even matter. And I was like, I'm going to die. Let's still go to Jack in the Box. But that's not the case with this. It's like, if you pasteurize it, you're total. So our ice creams, our dairies, our sour creams, all of that stuff is no problem.
No worries whatsoever.
Okay. And when they find out about this, like say you have a cow you're like, oh, that cow's not feeling good. They ditch that milk, right? Like they essentially continue milking and terminate the production from that cow.
If there's something in the milk that looks off or if they're treating the cow with antibiotics or a steroid to, deal with the discomfort, yeah, that milk is pulled and ditched.
Gotcha.
But all these animals that have low-lying symptoms and largely they're fine, that milk still stays with
Still
it.
viable because
Yeah.
it's going to go through a pasteurization process
Yes.
anyway. So it's
It's
like,
filtered, it's pasteurized. There's lots of processes it goes through to make sure it's safe for the consumer.
gotcha. Well, that's
But
good.
if we had to, every possible animal in this country, if we had to pull that milk from commercial sales, you'd have milk prices looking like egg prices right now.
Gotcha. With therapies, you're talking about antibiotics, you're talking about, potentially steroids. People get really worked up over vaccinating farm animals and consumption animals. Is that something that the dairy industry has been looking at as a thing, or is the effect of this so minimal that they're like, look, we can just do spot treatments with as things you're talking about?
Yeah. Really, the consideration on vaccination and the conversations there are largely at the USDA level.
Gotcha.
And there's a lot of mixed messages, on whether vaccination would be effective or not. Because we're talking a flu virus and you've got rapid mutations that are potentially there to where you could vaccinate and have it be completely ineffective, arguably. So there's still a lot of mixed messages out there as to whether vaccination is the right, the right answer or not. So they're trying to work through that. We vaccinate cattle for all sorts of illnesses, and if a vaccine proved effective and was effective at controlling transmission or minimizing symptomology, our dairymen would use it. But it's got to be effective, and it's got to whatever the cost of that dose is, you have to have a reasonable assurance that you're gonna get that money back in a healthy animal, and there's going to be an ROI on that investment.
Right. There has to be something that justifies the effort and the entire thing, and the downstream effects of everything else as well.
Yep.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And where we're fortunate in Idaho is we don't have a large poultry industry that, because we do see transmission from cow to bird.
Oh, interesting.
So you're going from, the original transmission into dairy cattle happened in Texas with waterfowl. And so understand, when I say waterfowl, that's different than a chicken. We're talking ducks, geese, those type waterfowl. Because often people can, when I say waterfowl, they're thinking chicken. No, it's not fatal for waterfowl. For waterfowl, they're an asymptomatic carrier.
Oh, so they don't even care. It's like the dumb
they're flying over, and we sit underneath the flyway. And so they're flying over, and that's how we're seeing it be transmitted to, dairy cattle, backyard poultry operations.
Gotcha.
Well, it's coming from waterfowl. They're an asymptomatic carrier typically. And then for chickens and turkeys, it's fatal. So even within bird species or different kinds of birds, you've got different ways it affects them. Interestingly, it's fatal for skunks and cats and those type of critters. So one of the telltale signs that you have bird flu is your barn cats start turning up dead.
Oh, and is it like 100% or really, really high probability?
The one thing that's consistent with this virus is it's variable.
Man, that's wild times. I don't want it to be variable with us though. Did you see that the film? Like, everybody saw Contagion, but did you watch that film over the last 5 years? Gwyneth Paltrow, her brain goes to mush.
Not in the last 5 years. No.
The end of that movie, when they like find the cure for the contagion, Matt Damon, makes it.
Always saves the day.
He always saves the day, and they're putting the virus into like cold storage or whatever it was. It's right next to this. There's this long pause where the researcher, the actress, like stares into the cold storage, and like then you see the vials of like H1N1, like other stuff. And that in that film, obviously the transmission went from like a bat to a pig to like humans in China, and then got spread around. But like I don't want, like, H1N1 was a big scare back in, that was like 2002, 2003. It was quite some time ago, but that's not what we're looking at here. Like, this is not something that causes like great respiratory distress in humans. It's like, okay, you got pink eye, no big deal, and you move on.
That is the typical symptom. Okay. And again, there's extremes to it. You've seen some extreme illnesses in individuals that have underlying conditions that have gotten it from poultry that have been more severe than conjunctivitis. But your typical symptom is conjunctivitis.
Gotcha.
And CDC still to this day classifies the human health risk for this as low.
Gotcha. Well, that's wonderful to know.
Yeah.
Right. And if people have compounding issues, and it's like they have compounding issues,
Yes.
and throw one more on, that's not going to be good for anyone. Great, Rick. Well, listen, you made me feel a lot better. Is there anything we're missing about this? Because I got really concerned with, understanding egg prices are going up, and then understanding that it was affecting dairy. So to really understand, it's like, listen, man, it's not that big of a deal for dairy.
Yeah. No, it's not that big of a deal for dairy. It's in states like California where you're seeing your egg prices impacted is, big poultry states where they're seeing it work through the poultry population. USDA, their response in poultry has been, because they viewed it as fatal for all poultry, that they've come in as soon as it's within a poultry operation, they come and depopulate the entire poultry operation, and then that operation has to stay dormant for a period of time. And so that's why you're seeing eggs and chicken prices that are extreme right now, is because you're seeing big poultry states like California affected. And it's good to hear USDA considering some different, because this has been how we've treated the virus, for the last decade, is it gets in a poultry operation, we depopulate, sit idle, repopulate, go forward. USDA's, looking at, is that the best response? That's why you're hearing conversations about vaccinations. The reality is, with poultry that's being exported, the meat products that are being exported, there's a risk to vaccination that they could lose some of their market share in the international markets. And so as you start to talk about vaccination programs, you've got to be conscious of the fact that you can have some, unintended consequences from just saying, hey, all poultry has to vaccinate. There's got to be some considerations to, okay, what do you do to their potential market share in international markets? And what do you do to the poultry industry if you just blanket, put out that requirement? Sure.
The mandate. What markets don't care for a roaster chicken that's been vaccinated?
So it's once you vaccinate the animal, you can't tell, did they have the virus naturally occurring, or do they have the titers and indications from the virus because
of the vaccination? Okay.
And countries want to protect themselves from getting this within their borders if possible. So it's a very nuanced conversation, and it's something that it's not as simple as people would like it to be. Do poultry operations that are just producing, they have laying hens that are producing eggs for the U.S. vaccination, that's a whole different conversation than vaccination for an operation that's producing meat for an international market.
Gosh, it's too much. It's too much, man.
Food production's complicated.
Yeah, no kidding. No kidding. I know this is unfair to spring it on you. What do you think? I've been talking to a lot of people about the bear and Roundup conversation. Is that something that the dairy industry is concerned about or taking a position on?
We haven't taken a position on the bill that they're looking at trying to run this session. Definitely conscious of the fact that glyphosate and Roundup it's a product that is beneficial when used properly. And understand that Bayer is in a tough position with the lawsuits, coming at them.
Sure.
So it very much feels like a no-win situation where you've got, like so much of food production, you've got a lack of understanding of how the product is used in food production and the benefits that it brings, because you start to look at the ability to reduce all your other chemical usage by being able to use Roundup.
Right.
There's so many other benefits to it that people don't typically see. They just hear, there's a potential for it to be a carcinogen when it's not used to label.
I had Galen Lee on recently from Sugar Beets and a bunch of other things.
Yep. Galen's a great dude.
He was great. And my main question was look, what did we do before Roundup? Help me understand that. And his story of essentially, he was we called it chemotherapy for the beets. Yeah. Where it's we have we'd spray everything. We'd spray like every like 9 to 12 days. And it would be a cocktail of 6 different chemicals. And it would kill the weeds, but it was so harmful that it would actually stop the beet growth. And it was like the beets would stop growing for like 5 days, and then they'd start growing again. And then we'd have to hit them again in like another week. And then they'd go dormant again and just wait. He's like, so you got these beets that were like, 40 to 50% smaller than the current beets, and they were getting hammered every single 2-week time frame by this cocktail of chemicals that were like terrible. And we couldn't spot treat, right? It's like you doused everything with this. It's like in the areas in between the beet rows, we'd actually turn over all of the dirt because we weren't spraying those guys with chemicals. So then it's like the earth completely gets disturbed in between all of these things, like the labor, the whole thing. He's like, now you have these boom arms that have electronic eyeballs that have individual sprayers. So they literally see a weed. They don't even spray everything. It's like they see a weed, like fire like a squirt gun. It's like there, and you just roll over, and they're like, we're using way less chemical. We're not spraying it everywhere. We're reducing man hours. We're not putting the beets through like the chemotherapy. It was wild hearing him. It's like, okay, so if Roundup goes away, we're going back to the beet chemotherapy. He's like, oh yeah, man. We're going back to the beet. Everything is going to cost more. We're using way more chemicals. And just because these don't necessarily have glyphosate in them does not mean you're going to get a healthier product. I was like, yikes.
Yeah, and beets are the extreme, but you look at alfalfa, corn, all the other crops that have the Roundup Ready attribute to them, and it's the same story, just to a lesser degree. We're able to do more with less, and have crops that are less dependent on other herbicides, and so you do have to have good crop rotations, and you do have, you can't just continually treat with Roundup. You've got to, part of the importance of some crop rotation is you're going to be treating with some other herbicides so you don't get Roundup resistance with weeds being treated year after year after year after year.
So it's like antibiotics. They can build up an immunity to it.
Yep.
Oh.
So there, and there is so many other reasons why you want a good crop rotation to make sure that you don't have other disease pressure issues within your fields. But there's a whole science to it, and this is where people don't understand the complexities of what we do in food production to produce the safest and most affordable supply of food in America that you can't get in any other country. And it's the ingenuity of the farmers that get that done.
Golly, man, what a time to be alive. That's awesome. Listen, Rick, I know you're running hot, and it's the end of the session. I really appreciate you coming and explaining this stuff. Is there anything you'd like to hit here at the end?
No, I think we covered. We talked about Roundup with that. That wasn't on the agenda.
That was not on the agenda. I
think we're good here, man.
Awesome.
Let's escape before we get into some other subject that's way deeper.
Before we really talk about being salty. Listen, I appreciate you. Thanks for coming in. Thanks for what you're doing for the cattle people in Idaho.
Hey, happy to be here.